Hello, everyone. My name is Barbara Velasquez. As the coordinator of international intercultural education at Metropolitan Community College, I'm excited that you. Oh, shoot. Was there a problem, Jason?
No.
Oh, okay, sorry. I'm excited that you're joining us for the first in a storytelling series in honor of Native American Heritage Month. National Native American Heritage Month celebrates and recognizes the accomplishments of the peoples who were the original inhabitants, explorers, and settlers of the United States. During this celebration at Metropolitan College, we endeavor to celebrate the rich histories, diverse cultures, and important contributions of our nation's first people. Your microphones will be silenced during the presentation, but afterwards, our storyteller will be pleased to engage you in conversation and question and answer. If you prefer not to speak, you may also send questions at any time to the hosts on the chat function. Your continued attendance at International Intercultural Education Programming could qualify you for recognition throughout the year. To be considered, complete the online evaluation and include your name and contact information. The online address will be on a slide at the end of the program, mccnab.edu/IIEEVAL. Elena Eagleshield grew up in the Long Soldier District on the Standing Rock Nation. She is tip of the horn Lakota, lives on knives and dwellers of the sacred Lake Dakota and Arikara. First and foremost, she is Ina, or mother of two beautiful children named Her Sacred Breath Woman and Blue Thunder Returns. Alayna is thankful for her prayerful partner who agrees that traditional life ways are always leading in their lives and the work they do together. Alayna's education includes res education from home and a mix of education at tribal community college, state college, and university settings. She is a reactivated language warrior and health promotion worker, recognizing that traditional languages are the center of who they are as Indigenous people. Working as a language specialist for her tribe and as a language activities instructor for the tribe's language immersion school has equipped Elena with the knowledge and tools to create language videos and training materials to better share teachings and language with her people all over the world through social media and training settings. In her work as a director for the health education program on Standing Rock, she also used language and traditions to guide her health promotion work. Currently, Ms. Eagle is a doctoral student at the College of Education and a research assistant at the Banks Center for Educational Justice at the University of Washington. She serves on multiple boards and committees. Please welcome Ms. Elena Eagleshield and listen as she shares stories selected for your enjoyment and learning.
Midakiapi, Iushkiawachiankapi, Elena Eagleshield the Machiapi, Iuha Chante Washdenape Chuzapi, Wazia Ekta Lakota Makochiki, Ion Waslata Kichtahaska Mataha, Michincha Yamani, yeah, Mahasani Red Rock Perkins Chiapi, Naha Atewayaki John Eagleshield Senior Chiapi, Naha Inawayaki Valerie Eagleshield Chiapi, Unchiwayaki Helen Felix, Naha Ena Ada Fraser Ewicha Kiapi, Na Lalawayaki Fritz Eagleshield, and Waldo Zahn Senior Ewicha Kiapi. Wana Mini Wichoni Clinic and Farm Ekta Washia Chamu Naha University of Washington Ekta Wonspe. All right, so hi everybody. My name is Elena Eagleshield. Felt kind of shamed out with that whole big old bio because it's really crazy to have somebody read all the things, but I'm very thankful that I was asked to be a storyteller. I come from Standing Rock. My father is John Eagleshield Sr. My mother is Valerie Eagleshield. I named my grandparents in my introduction, which is Helen and Ada, and then Fritz and Waldo. And they're from Standing Rock and the 3 affiliated tribes, and also Santee. So I used to always only introduce myself as a Standing Rock Hunkpapa Lakota. And then I remember I was in a room, I was really speaking to some relatives, and I introduced myself, and they're like, and where else are you from? I was like, oh, dang it. Got shamed out by the aunties. And so I've been really working on including all aspects of where I come from, and that is also being Santee Dakota, and Arikara from the 3 affiliated tribes, as well as Hunkpapa Lakota from Standing Rock. In my bio, I said I have 2 kids, but I haven't updated it since this past summer, and I recently had a 3rd baby. He's 5 weeks old. I had him right here in my home, which was huge, and it was scary, but it was really beautiful, and I'm very thankful for all that I was able to learn. I'm currently the co-executive director for the Miniwichoni Clinic and Farm, and I also work as a project manager for the Miniwichoni Nakichiji Wounspe. Both are traditional. One is a traditional school, and one is a traditional clinic, or that is based in our Lakota Dakota Lifeways. That was first, both organizations were first created at the Ocheti Shakoi camp in 2016. But before that, I grew up, completely immersed in our way of life, and have been around stories and storytelling. My dad is an elder in our community, but I'm his first child. He had me in his mid 40s, and I'm 31 now. So I basically was raised by an elder, and he continues to be a strong force in my life. He's in his 70s right now. And so yeah, so the story I'll be sharing is about generosity, wowa chantoganake, and I'll share a presentation, but that's just a little bit about myself. I hope that each of you take whatever you can from this and share, whatever lessons you get from it. I think long time ago we were taught that whatever you get from a story is what you're ready for, and what is meant to come out of that story for you and your specific experiences, and whatever lessons you're meant to carry forward. And I think a long time ago, when the missionaries first came over, they kind of expected us to all have the same exact versions, kind of like what, and no offense to any Christians in here, but or whoever follows the Bible, but that the way the Bible was told is like specific, and each story has the exact same, story, and people interpreted them through the Bible. And so they would discount a lot of our stories if they weren't exactly, if all of us told them a little bit different. And so even amongst Lakota Dakota people, our creation stories have variations to them. And that's what we want, however our experiences. So each and every one of you who are in here, however I tell this story, each of you will get a different meaning from it, or something about the story will inform your way of thinking in a different way. And so I just wanted to get that point, and I'll talk a little bit more about one of my favorite authors. Her name is Leanne Simpson. So yeah, thank you for including me, and I'll jump right into it. I think I'm able to share my my screen, and I would like to just share a presentation with you all, and then we'll see how far I get. I'll be conscious of time also, to save time at the end so we can visit. All right. Hey, I don't know if anybody wants to take a deep breath real quick, but I know I just zoomed right through that. I'll just do it really quick. I'll do 3 of them. So breathe in. Wanji. Numpa. Yamini. All right. Oh, I always forget to just do that whenever I'm nervous. I know I probably don't sound nervous, but I yawn a lot, and I know that's me, my body telling me you need to breathe. And so here I am. I am currently in my PhD program, and so it's real cool to have those cool letters behind your name, but I have my Master of Public Health. I often use this website. It's native-land.ca when I'm presenting anywhere, and it's been different because I've been virtual. So I know, I'm in my own homelands in North Dakota. I'm on the plains, and so this is Mandan and Lakota Dakota territory right now. But that's a really good website to go to if you're ever wondering the lands that you're on, if you're traveling, or if you live in a certain area. And I just wanted to thank Barbara and also my friend, really, really good friend, Steve Tamayo, who recommended me. He actually spent a lot of time with us at the camp, and I'll share a little bit more about camp. I won't get too far into it, but I'll share that at the end here. Oh, hope it didn't freeze. Okay, and so these are just images I'm using to kind of give you a visual. The story, I don't own the rights to any of these images, but the story I'll be sharing today is about Woa Chantoganake, which is generosity. And if any of you know who Joseph Marshall is, he shares this story. And I've just learned so much from him, and hope I get to write a book with him someday. All right, so the story just talks about how generosity has been shared and demonstrated through the Lakota Dakota people a long time ago, and it talks about they were way north north of the medicine line, which for us is the Canadian line, that imaginary line that these two countries had created. But before Canada and America were countries, the Lakota Dakota people would move fluidly through those territories, and when it was created, we ended up calling it the medicine line because we knew how sacred both lands were to us. And there's still people in Canada that have different variations. So we hear Lakota, Dakota, Nakota, but there are other variations that we've heard of. I've never got to hear them or witness them personally, but I've heard of Jakota, I've heard of different Stony Nakota, and I've actually heard some of the languages spoken. And I used to be the language specialist for my tribe. My dad's a fluent speaker. I taught in our immersion nest, and it was Lakota it was a version of the language that I've never heard, and I wasn't able to understand it as good, but it's really beautiful. And so this story takes place north of that medicine line, and it talks about how the winter was so bad, and it was very, very cold, and the food was scarce, and the people were realizing that there wasn't very many Shugmani Tutrankas around, which I'll use a lot of our Lakota words in here, but Shugmani Tutranka is a wolf, and there weren't very many Shugmani Tutrankas anymore. And so they were, as camp leaders, they decided that they needed to move and try to find where the food was. And once they made that decision, they all, rested for a bit. And when they woke up, they seen that there was so much snow, and it was just blistering cold. And so they knew that they couldn't move with elderly and children in the camp. And so they all gathered again, and they decided that with food being so scarce and the curved horned deer weren't around, that they needed to figure out how to send their best hunters. And so they decided that 2 of their best hunters would go scout and find them some food so that they could start making their way towards more abundant food sources and water and land that's not as cold. And so they're two of the hunters that they decided that they were going to use were Seize the Bear and Left Hand, to go deep into the forest to find food for the camp, because the small kill that they were finding wasn't enough to feed everybody. So the Seize the Bear or Seize the Bear and Left Hand, they set out to go find game, and they ended up finding some deer, and they were tracking them. But while they were tracking these deer, they had to make sure to conserve their own energy and to conserve their arrows. So if they saw little game, they had to really analyze if it was a sure shot or if they were able to get it, because they couldn't waste their arrows. And so if they shot their arrows, it would get lost in the snow. So they had to make sure that they were close enough, that it was a big enough, if it was a rabbit or if it was something that was a squirrel that was big enough for them to feed both of them. And so they had to analyze all these things while trying to track this deer, while conserving their own energy. And so when you think about that, think about how all these decisions had to be thought of, right then and there, when our people were making choices and things for the interests of all of our people. And so they were tracking this trachja, which is a deer. They were tracking this trachja, and the trachja ended up falling into a snow gully. And so they were able to shoot at it while it was struggling to get out. And so they were very thankful, and they thanked Creator that trachja was able to, that it fell into the gully so that they could get it, and that it was successful. But they had been traveling for days by then, so then they had to make a plan for how they were going to get home and how to conserve their energy, and also take as little as they could and still try to get the small game so that they could make it back to their people with enough meat. And so they set up a camp, and they had their trachja, and they were just waiting. And then all of a sudden, this old shugmanitu, which is a coyote. So a shugmanitu tranca was a wolf, and a shugmanitu was a coyote. So one was big and one was small. If you guys know tranca and chicala, it's Lakota. So this old grandma shugmanitu came to their camp and asked for some of their meat. And she was saying that it wasn't for her. She said, "I'm an old grandma, and but this is for I've lived a long life, but this is for my family and my young ones at home." And so Seize the Bear saw it. He woke up Left Hand, and he said, are you seeing this right now? I've never seen a shugmanitu so close to fire before, so close to a campfire. And so they both agreed that it wasn't something that they were dreaming or having, a vision from their hunger and exhaustion. And so they cut off a piece and they gave it to the Unchi Shugmanitu. And she said that from then on, if they ever heard the Shugmanitu when they're howling, that's them singing their praises and their thanks. Sorry, I skipped a few. That was a Trachja, and this is a Shugmanitu. And she said that when they hear the coyotes, that they'll be singing their thanks to the people for being so giving and sharing. And so then they started to walk again, and they were traveling, and then all of a sudden they seen this bird or zinkgala flying towards them, and it was an unkjehila, unkjehicha, which is a magpie. So the unkjehicha flew in and said that they asked if they could. They said they're really hungry, and that they see that they're carrying some meat, and they've been traveling and there's no food. So they asked if they could have some, and Left Hand got very upset. He started to get mad now because without even thinking, Seize the Bear was starting to share and not even asking or questioning these animals that were coming up to them. And so Left Hand got upset, and then sees the bear, just sees the Unkjehicha, and cuts off a chunk and gives it to them. And the Unkjehicha said that from here on out, when there are hard times, the Unkjehicha won't be around, and that'll be the sign that they know that there's no food around. But when they're abundant and they're everywhere, it'll be a sign that there's plenty, that there's plenty of food around. So now, anytime you see Unkjehicha or magpies around, that's when you know that there's plenty. And so if you, in the winter time, if you're able to be on your lands, or if you drive around town or countryside and you see them, then that's when you know that they're abundant. And so he offered them this food, and they offered that, but Left Hand was still very upset. And so they continued to walk. They broke their camp, and they continued to travel home with this big carcass of this trachja. And pretty soon, a large group of Shugmanitu Tranka approached them, or this one large Shugmanitu Tranka approached them. Sorry, I'm just getting into my stories. I'm trying to share these videos here. That's a Unkjehicha. Okay, so they saw a big Shugmanitu Tranka, and it approached them, and it had a hurt paw. And he said he keeps finding these trachja, but he can't catch them because his paw is hurt. And so he asked them if they could share some of the meat. So sees the bear, just freely, right, without even thinking about it, just cuts off a piece and gives it to the Shugmanitu Tranka. And the Shugmanitu Tranka said, even though he has a hurt paw, that one of his best skills is that he's a really skilled hunter. And so for exchange of that meat, that from here on out, that sees the bear will have these really good hunting skills. And so by then, Left Hand, he explodes, and he's so angry. He said, well, now we have less meat for our people, and this is your fault. And he starts he just blames him for giving it away and not thinking of the people, but trying to share with these animals that should be taking care of themselves. And he just very angry by this point. And then they continue on their journey back to the people, and then they come across a shunchila, which is a fox. It's a shunchila. They come across a shunchila, and he asks for some of the meat. He says he usually is able to catch small game for himself. He said that the rabbits, they have these long paws that can run on top of the snow, but his little skinny feet just sink right into the snow, and so he's not able to catch them. And so it's been hard. He's exhausted, and he would like some meat. And so again, sees the bear, just freely gives it, but Left Hand is very upset. And so sees the bear, gives it to the shunchila, and the shunchila tells him that because he shared this meat with him, that the shunchila is a skilled hider. He can hide really well. And that from here on out, sees the bear will be able to hide. And so if he's ever searching for game and hunting, that when he'll be able to hide and sneak up on them. And by then, Left Hand, he's so upset that he sees the bear that he's going to go ahead of him, and he's going to tell the people that they're not going to have enough meat because sees the bear keeps gifting it away so freely to these animals. And so he leaves him. Left Hand leaves, sees the bear, and runs ahead to go tell the people. And so sees the bear is left alone, dragging the trachja, and he ends up getting to an ice, like a water bed. And so it's ice, and solid ice, and so he's able to drag it across a little bit better than if it was just snow. And since he was by himself, that was really helpful. And he ends up seeing this chetan in a tree, and this chetan notices that he has this meat and he's by himself. And So he's walking along the bank, but still on the ice. And so there's a bunch of trees because they're in the forest. And so that Chekdon was watching him, but that Chekdon had a hurt wing, and so he couldn't fly. And so he noticed that. Um, and he talked about how he caught a rabbit, which is a mashtinchala. He caught a rabbit. Um, sorry, this is slower than I thought it was going to be. He caught a mashtinchala, but he fought a cat, a short-tailed cat, over that over that rabbit, and so that cat hurt his wing, and so that's why he was injured. And but he was really hungry, and so sees the bear, cuts a piece of meat, and he hands it to the hawk. And the hawk explains how he hasn't seen his kind around that area. And so he sees the bear, explains to him how he's out, him and his kola were out there looking for food. And so they ended up finding a kakcha for their people. And so the hawk says that he flies, you know, pretty high, and he knows that area. And if they continue to follow the forest, it'll take them to the lake country, where there will be plenty of food and water, and that they'll be successful that way if they continue. And so he continues to walk, and thought about that, and was thinking, as he's going back, what is he going to tell his people, and how are they going to, you know, take that information. And so as he gets closer, he ends up putting the trakta into this hollowed out tree, because it was getting heavier for him to carry, and he wanted it to be safe so that he could go, you know, go meet his people and just address them and let them know, you know, his apologies, and that he only wanted what was best for everybody. And so he approached the community, and the elders said, Left Hand told us what you have done. Now let's hear your side of the story. And so he ends up telling them, you know, yeah, it's true. This is what happened. And these animals approached us. And he said, but I was only doing what the elders had always taught us to do, and that's to be generous, and to give what we have, and to share. And so he shares his side, and he tells them, but I put what was left of the trakcha in a hollowed out tree. And so he shows them where it's at. And Left Hand was just felt so righteous, and he led those men to the tree, and he was like, you know, I'm telling you, he gave most of it away. And he tried pulling that, he walked to that hollowed out tree, and he tried pulling that deer out of the tree, and he realized how heavy it was. And so he ended up asking for help. He asked the other men if they could come help pull it out. But when he pulled it out, he realized that the deer was whole. The trakja was completely whole. And he was astonished, and he didn't know what, you know, how that was possible. And then all of a sudden, they were all standing around the deer, you know, not sure how it was whole for them, knowing both of the stories were both told the same way, that the meat was gifted, and that, you know, there was barely any of the deer left. And then all of a sudden, this Trakcha Nari showed up, the spirit of the deer, it showed up, and it said, as long as they continue to be generous, that the people won't ever starve, and as long as they continue to enact the values that were set forth by them, by the Creator, that the people will continue to get things in return. And so from then on, the elders realized that the teachings that they had always lived by, that the two men, out of the two men, Seize the Bear was the one that was actually enacting them. And so by honoring him, they gave him a new name. So it wasn't Seize the Bear anymore, it was Brings the Deer. And he became a skilled hunter with many gifts that the animals had gifted him. And because of how Left Hand handled things, his life was filled with a lot of misfortune. And so that's the end of that story. And I just want to share some of the things that for me, why I love that story so much, is because I think when you think about all the different stories in a lot of our different, in especially Lakota, all I know is our Lakota ways. But a lot of the stories that are told, there's always those, in I don't know, Western way, they say like you know, a good angel and a devil or something. There's always those different sides of the story and different ways that you can go about learning or understanding the road. Like there's always a road, and you can take this path or that path, and each of them have different consequences. And so really, what consequence are you willing to live with? And I shared this picture because that was a story that we shared with one of the students at the camp, because it was during the Ochetishakoi camp. People were coming in from all over the world. And one of the things that we realized right away was that we had to really enact kinship here. You know, there was limited resources at the camp. There was a lot of donations coming in, but it wasn't just for Standing Rock people. And so how can we distribute and share? And the way that we do that is by taking people as our relatives and then treating them as our relatives. Because for all of all of our communities continue to let us, to remind us that kinship is so important, because when claim somebody as your relative, then you treat them that way. And so when we told the students that story about generosity and about those animals, they were like, what, we talk to animals? I didn't know that. And we're like, yeah, a lot of our elders still talk to animals. It really depends on what your connection is, or how well you're listening to them, because a lot of times they're talking to us, but if we're not ready for it, then we don't hear them. And so they're like, oh, that's so cool. But before that, they came from a school system that would never say that they can talk to animals, that you're crazy if you talk to animals. And so they were in this process of like unlearning and relearning, right? Reactivating this knowledge that had always been theirs. And this guy, I cannot remember what tribe he came from, but he ended up coming and telling us a story, and I'll share it really quick, like a quick synopsis. About this young boy who he really wanted to impress his grandma who took care of him. He wanted to impress his community. And so he wanted to hunt all the animals that he could, because he wanted to, just be really impressing them. And so what he ended up doing was he tricked all these animals to get into this bag. He said, if you get into this bag, I'll take you to a new land. You'll have new homes. It'll be the most beautiful place you've ever seen. But you got to get in this bag so I can take you there. And I can't show you where it's at because, I just can't show you. I don't remember how he said it. And so he got them all to go into the bag. All of the animals, they went into the bag. And he ended up taking it to his grandma. And he's like, Grandma, I have all this meat in here, and I brought it for you. And the grandma scolded him, and she said, no, you never take more than you need. That's not how you hunt. That's not a good way to do it. And you tricked them, you lied to them. And so he felt real shamed out. And she was like, go, take them back. Let them be back in their homes. And so he left, with his head down. But he was like, okay, I'm going to do this, but these animals are going to be mad at me. So what can I do? Oh, I'm going to take them over the hill, and I'm going to let them free and tell them that's their new home. And so he does that. He takes them over the hill, lets them out into their new home. And he was like, yeah, this is your new home, because he was really still driven by his ego at this point. And so they get out, and they're like, wow, this is beautiful. Thank you for bringing us here. We really appreciate it. And the eagle came out of the bag, and he flew up as high as he could, and he started flying around. He was happy. And then all of a sudden he realized that his home was just right there. And he was like, wait a minute, wait, we're still here, we're still in our home. What did you do? And so the young boy just kind of confessed, and he was like, I'm really sorry. I wanted to impress my people, and so I tricked all of you. And so the animals decided that they weren't going to talk to humans anymore because they couldn't trust us. And so having that was just a quick synopsis of it, but having that knowledge with the knowledge of the generosity story, weeks apart probably by now, where these kids are sitting here, the kids were like, oh, that's why animals don't talk to us no more. They're like, because our people lied to them, and so when you think about how important our stories are in transmitting this knowledge, and why it's so important for us to be able to have these connections to each other, because all of our stories are different, but they also have so much meaning behind them. And there's ways that this whole other tribe that this guy came from told a story that answered a question that our students had, you know, and they connected the two. It had nothing to do with us, but I think a part of them being able to make that connection and know that it's true was that in the space at camp, at the Ochete Shakoi camp, they were able to just know the truth of who they are without it being questioned, I guess. And so I know I only have a little bit of time. I want to leave time for questions, but I wanted to run through a little bit. So I grew up on Standing Rock my whole life. My dad's a fluent speaker. He didn't teach me the language, but I learned more about why that was, you know, down the road. I was really angry about it for a long time. And then when we had our very first immersion school on Standing Rock, it was called the Lakoyapi Wahochpi. In 2012, it opened. And so my daughter ended up becoming the very first, one of, you know, a part of the very first cohort. There was 10 kids that joined that cohort. And they learned the language and they got to live it every single day. And so for me, that was my very first eye-opening of like that we can be learning our language. It can be something that is driven by our communities. It can be something that is for our communities. And so in 2016, when the Ochete Shakoi camp was set up to oppose the Dakota Access Pipeline, I founded a school called the Miniwichoni Nakichiji Owaiowa, which means Defenders of the Water School. And we ended up now, as we're continuing to develop it for Standing Rock, now we have a whole team, and we call it the Miniwichoni Nakichiji Waunspe. We took out Owaiowa because Owaiowa means like it's a coined word in Lakota that means school. But when you say Waunspe, it's like a place of learning, which doesn't have to happen in one specific area. And so just shifting our minds, we changed that word to shift what it means for the school to be developing on Standing Rock still. And we had a lot of unlearning to do. We had like a Western daily schedule, which was just like, oh, from 9 to 10, we'll do this. From 10 to 11, we'll do that. And it never worked out that way. It just wasn't possible. This was the council lodge, and this was the very first day that the school, you know, was open or took place. They just continued to learn so much from the school. I wish I had time, I would show you this, but if you look up Defenders of the Water School on YouTube, you can see some of the kids that were at the camp. And this video is so powerful because we're still very connected with this family. This boy who's in this video, his mom was actually the one who delivered her baby at the camp, and she helped me to deliver my baby at home here. And so it's just so many beautiful connections that continue to happen. And I think it all has been like a huge eye opener that even though we're on reservations, even though we're Indigenous people, that is almost like we needed that reminder, like that we can use our traditional ways for health, you know, to inform our health, to inform our education. Because even though we're tribal communities, a lot of times we've been acculturated and assimilated so much by these federal processes that even developed our tribal governments that sometimes we don't know that we're still buying into them. And so for me, growing up the way I did, always thinking I had to live in two different worlds, I think being a part of this process of revitalizing this clinic and this school has been huge, because I've always held both of them in two different places. And now I'm like, all right, we don't have to do that no more. We can use these ways to inform this stuff now, inform our education, inform our health. And so it's kind of like blossoming into so many different things on Standing Rock. And so anyways, this is just a snapshot view of some of the things that happened the first couple of days. I was trying to document as much as I could. And
Elena, could you repeat the website where they go to the website to watch that video?
Yep, so it's YouTube. And if you just look up Defenders of the Water School, at the end of this presentation too, I will put it in the chat if you'd like. but so this guy, he came from New Zealand. He taught the kids the haka. We ended up having a local, his name is I forgot his Philip Bird horse, and he brought his horses to camp, and he let the kids like learn about horsemanship. The students got to learn about how all these different kitchens, you know, that are outside feed all of the community and what it takes. um, Ricardo Cate, he does all those cartoons. He came and held many workshops with the kids. We had different local people from Sitting Bull College teach them like clay art. And this was like what our classrooms look like, just big green tents. Um, and they learned so much. And also at the same time, there was constant media telling the students like how dangerous it is, or telling the outside world how dangerous the camp is and how crime has spiked in North Dakota, and you know, all these things that were scaring people outside of the camp. But the students were like, this is beautiful, you know, we get to live our way of life, we get to learn from our community. This isn't something that is dangerous. And a lot of these families live there for months. So yeah, so I just I shared that story, and I also wanted to let you guys know about Leanne Simpson. I don't know if you want to write this down, but she's an amazing author. But the thing in particular I want to talk about right now is she has this chapter in one of her books. It's called Land as Pedagogy, and it talks about the intelligence of Anishinaabe people. And she talks about how that there is a spiritual knowledge that's a source of wisdom that is the core of everything in this physical world. And how we access that knowledge is by being open to it, by being engaged in that way of life, and that it doesn't discriminate by gender, age, or ability. And so this same story that I shared with you guys, you could hear it over and over again through your whole life. And each time, depending on where you're at, you'll get something different from it. And that's what I was trying to explain in the beginning, is that each of our indigenous intelligence allows us to take on certain stories, certain teachings, for whatever we're ready for at that moment in our lives. And so I love Leanne Simpson, the way she shares it and how she talks about it, because me growing up on Standing Rock, I feel like I was so ignorant that I'm like, okay, I get it, Dad. You know, like, okay, we can talk to animals. You know, like these things that I was so ignorant to when I was younger. But now as I'm older, now as I'm studying a lot of these things, now that, you know, that the pandemic has happened and we're going to the land more and more, because it's, you know, just safe to be on the land with my dad rather than in their house with them to expose them to anything, that I'm having a deeper appreciation for all of the things that my dad tried to teach me a long time ago, that I'm absorbing them differently. And so if you can find that article and read it, or that chapter, it's so amazing. And it helped me to understand, like, I think I used to like kind of beat myself up about it at first. I'd be like, why didn't I get this stuff long time ago? You know, why didn't I appreciate it long time ago? And it's something that all of our elders and all of our people knew already. So if you ever hear your elders or people in your community tell the same story over and over again, or if they're trying to teach you the same thing over and over again, then it's probably something that you're getting more and more ready for, because you're noticing it and you're probably taking more and more from it. And so as you listen to these next storytellers in the series, I just ask you all to think about that, and to think about whatever it means to you. If you need to smudge or pray or you know, meditate or journal, or think of these ways that I wanted to do a writing activity but don't have time. But yeah, think of how these stories are coming to you, and then I would even revisit your notes or whatever in a week or a month or next year, and just notice how much information comes to you differently. And so yeah, I wanted to leave time for us to have a little bit of dialogue. I usually don't like this format where I just talk the whole time, but I know we're all trying to navigate this online forum. And so here's a little bit of my information. You can email me. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter. And so, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Elena. And for everybody out there, you're welcome to open up your microphones. And if you have a question you'd like to ask, please help us engage this conversation.
Hi, Alayna. Thank you so much for the stories. Is the writing exercise something that we can do on our own?
Oh yeah. I just I'll put the questions in the chat, but it's just for me, because I'm a doctoral student, I've just been trying to figure out how to think through these different readings that I do and the different ways that I'm understanding our Indigenous intelligence and Indigenous health and education, because I think for so long, I've always thought that we just had, we had to only live in two worlds, or I didn't get it at first for a long time because I was like, well, it's different. How do we live in two worlds? Because I'm not in trouble when I speak my language, or and so, yeah, so I think these are just very personal to you all. And also, I think I really, sorry, trying to multitask too. I really have been thinking about how we start seeing each other as relatives, like how each of our intelligence could make room for each other, not only in other Indigenous communities, but in with our Black communities as well, our Black brothers and sisters. And that's kind of some of the work that I do. So we just published a book in April, which is crazy because it's when the pandemic was, just full blast here in the United States. But it's called Education and Movement Spaces from Standing Rock to Chicago Freedom Square. And we really talk about the need for us to start to be seeing each other as relatives, and how our movements are always implicated, basically, like we're all struggling under colonialism and capitalism, and so, yeah. I put the questions in the chat, so sorry.
Do you want to repeat the name of the book again, and I'll put that in the chat?
Yep. It's called Education and Movement Spaces. And it's co-edited by myself, Elena Eagleshield, Django Paris, Ray Paris, and Tim San Pedro. And it has Steve Tamayo is actually in it, which is so awesome. And then our whole team from the school, different people from Chicago Freedom Square, which was a movement in Chicago it was a camp that was basically set up in an abandoned parking lot across from the police station. And they were protesting the lack of education, lack of healthcare, lack of all these different things in their communities. And so they had 7 tents set up, which was so cool, because for us at the Ocheti Shakoi camp, we had 7 teepees, which was the Ocheti Shakoi, which represented our 7, sacred council fires of the Lakota people. And so just so many different ways that all of our movements are co-implicated in how we are just connected to each other. So, yeah.
Elena, I'll ask a question. What are your dreams? I think you said you're 31.
Yeah.
So for a lot of us, you have just such a large life in front of you. What are some of the dreams that you would like to see accomplished?
So we're currently working on developing the school and the clinic that were started at the camp. I think I would love for each of our community members to step into reimagining what our communities could look like. Because like I said earlier, even our tribal programs, our tribal education, I mean, our tribal education, our tribal governments, all of them are basically federal processes that were designed and created to acculturate and assimilate us and to make us just like mainstream, white people. And I think if we don't know that we don't have to continue to follow that, or we don't have to be the status quo, that we don't have to continue to, reach those levels of success, and we start turning towards our own levels of success, or turning towards what our elders and our ancestors wanted us to be doing, like enacting our kinship, like enacting our indigenous intelligence, then I think we're going to continue to have the loss, the tremendous loss in our communities, as we see. And so I just envision reconnecting with all my relatives on Standing Rock and uplifting each other and bringing each other into these spaces where our education and our healthcare and our energy sources are all I guess rooted in our traditional ways.
Cindy. We need you to unmute yourself, please, Cindy.
There we go. I'm having a little trouble with my computer this afternoon, so I apologize for that. But thank you for sharing your stories. And I'm going to, with your permission, implement some of those questions on stories in the human service field. Is that okay to do that?
Yeah, these, I mean, yeah, I'm open to anything.
I think it would help my students. I teach human services, but to connect with more real grounded things and just sort of get to know who they are through this process. And then they could share as much of their story with the class as they felt comfortable with. Does that seem like an appropriate way to? This is amazing. I am so grateful. And again, I apologize. I don't know if my computer is having a moment or what, but we just keep going around. But thank you. I really appreciate it. And I may let you know how that goes after the winter quarter, send you an email and just let you know.
Yes. And anybody, please email me, reach out to me. I'm happy to share. We're in the process of, working on the school, trying to figure out the clinic development. I'm and working with our community in this time too. So we've been having virtual sessions with elders, and any way I could help you all in whatever process you're in and within your community, I'm happy. So email me, please.
I just super appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? So I just did want to say that yesterday, Wainima Morris was talking about the Native American view of water. And all of our hearts are with you. She mentioned Standing Rock, and she did comment on how the plans to move forward were only put on like hold for a year. And so I know we'll all be thinking of what's going to be coming up in the future.
Yes, thank you. It feels like, well, during camp when everything was happening, it felt like a roller coaster. Like, oh, okay, they need tribal, what is it called? When they need to request the tribal's consultation first, and then everybody celebrated, and then Trump got in office and they pushed it through, and then, just so many roller coasters of thinking that they're going to do the right thing, and listen to our people. And it's a lot to keep up with. And so, yes, please keep our community in your prayers, because it feels like we have so much mistrust, and and the 27th was the day that the North Treaty Camp was taken down. And so a lot of people are having a hard time during this time when they were all put in cages. And even though it's been 4 years, 4 years ago, it's kind of where a lot of those iconic pictures were taken with, that young woman on the horse and all the machinery and stuff behind it. And there's just so many things that happened in this week 4 years ago. And so I just ask that you continue to pray for those that are still struggling in my community.
Okay, well, everybody I know wants to wish you well, and thank you very much, Elena, for taking time and sharing from your life. And it's not always easy to tell everybody about how you grew up or things that are important to you, but it really helps us to get a window on the world. And that was so appreciated. Thank you for your time. Thank you to the audience who came in on, let's see, 2:00 in the afternoon on a Thursday. I know some of us are already kind of thinking about the weekend, but hopefully this gets you into a good weekend to have had such a nice conversation. If anybody needs anything related to this presentation, you can get back to our office. Jason, would you please put up the slide, first slide? This is just a reminder that we do appreciate your feedback on our online evaluation. It helps us to improve. If you choose to add your name and contact, which you do not have to do, but if you choose to do that, you could be eligible for recognition throughout the year for continued attendance. And then our final slide. And there's a question that's come in, but I'll just read this slide first. Our next Native American Heritage Month program will be next week. We're gonna, everybody's gonna get their energy together and do the best things they can for the election. And then after the election's over, we'll get started again. So best wishes to everybody. We hope you voted already, or if you haven't, you plan to, and that you consider encouraging and helping others that would like to vote and may need some assistance to get to the polls. So on Wednesday after the election at 2:30 in the afternoon, Chef Sean Sherman, who many people think of as the sous chef, which that's actually the name of his, a co-founded company, co-founder of NATIFS, will be sharing his presentation, The Revolution of Indigenous Food Systems of North America. Another that is free, and access is open to you if you get on Zoom, and the address is there. Again, you can contact me if you have any more questions about that. I'm going to bring in Karina's final question. Is there anything we can do to support the school or your community?
Yes, we actually have the school doesn't have a website yet, but it's working on one. And we have a Facebook page. It's just called the Miniwi Choni Nakichiji Wa Unspa. I could hopefully pop it in really quick before we go. And then our clinic has a here, I'll pop in our clinic website. And then our school just has a Facebook page. If you type in the Miniwi Choni, let me see, I think we changed it to Wa'unspa online, but it was not Iowa for a long time. Miniwi Choni. Yep, Miniwi Choni Nakichiji Wa'unspa. Let me try to see if I can. But it's / I'm pretty sure it's / Defenders of the Water School still. Yep. So there's the Facebook / Defenders of the Water School. And those have that has all the things that we've been working on. Because I'm a part of both organizations, and because we're trying to find ways that the organizations on Standing Rock can work together. Like there's a wind farm. We'll be having a live stream soon with the wind farm on Petui that's being developed on Standing Rock. And we're going to talk about all these different grassroots organizations that started, you know, with community members on Standing Rock that are like boots on the ground people, and how we can work together to funnel funds and share resources and things like that. And so that's coming up in November, which we haven't set a date yet. We just had a meeting about it yesterday, but we'll be sharing all that stuff on our Facebook pages. And then the clinic Facebook page is just the Mini Wetoni Clinic and Farm, but there's a lot of different duplicate posts because we have been like doing food drives and gardens, box gardens, and different things on Standing Rock. And so both of our organizations have been working really closely together. So
Thank you so much. So we want to one more time thank everybody and have a good afternoon. And we will be saying goodbye for the afternoon.
all right, thank you everybody.